So the Jackie McMullen piece on the Nets, which talked about like KD and Kyrie and whatever else, got a little bit of noise around it, mainly from the Kyrie mood swings thing, and we'll get into that. But I think this whole idea of the Nets and Kyrie right now is very interesting, especially because they haven't had the best start right now. They've had a bunch of close games. They lost the Pacers by 10, but they've had 3 close games, and they're 1-3. It's what it is. But it's the idea of a team that built up the culture over quite a few seasons and bringing in guys like Jared Allen, Joe Harris, Spencer Dinwiddie, Karis LeVert, taking on veterans like DeMarre Carroll, who may have gotten, I don't want to say given up on, but their former teams were content with letting them go, we'll say. And they took in these guys who you knew would have the mentality of, okay, I'll do what you tell me. And they had a lot of success with it. And now they're taking on veterans who are stars. Kyrie Irving is Kyrie Irving, of course. And there's already a thing in Jackie's piece about how the Nets, they like to put trackers on the players in like this 2-day training camp before the season begins, and it just helps them with analytics in some regard, player tendencies and whatever else, okay? And Kyrie was like, no, I don't want to do that. And it seems like that was the first pushback that the Nets ever really got to their status quo, which makes sense because, again, when you have someone like Joe Harris who's coming in just trying to make an NBA team, he's going to do anything you tell him to do. Kyrie Irving is clearly in a different situation. So it's interesting to see just how that all plays out. And I think that type of energy is translating onto the court. And I'll get to the mood swing stuff eventually. But when we see it on the floor, it's noticeable. I mean, this was a team where in last season they were like 7th or 8th in the league in passes per game at about 310. This season, they're towards the bottom of the league in passes per game at 248. And it's easy to see why when you're watching. Kyrie has a lot of possessions where it's just, hey, I'm going to figure this out. And the numbers have been great. And, you know, if he makes that one buzzer beater, they're 2-2 and they look a little better. And, you know, they had another really close game against the Grizzlies, which if he doesn't get blocked by Ja Morant, maybe that goes in. They're 3-1. But it's still a drastic difference in what Brooklyn was doing. And this was even with D'Angelo Russell shooting like crazy for however long last season. But even then, I feel like that was a little bit more of like an infrastructure thing, whereas this is Kyrie coming in saying, I'm Kyrie Irving, give me the damn ball, right? Like the D'Lo stuff felt like, 1, everybody was totally in line with it. 2, they were still making more passes. And 3, it just seemed like it was the organization saying, okay, D'Lo, it's your time to do this. You know, you've been with us for a couple years. Everybody here knows you. It's going to go fine. And this is, of course, a different situation, the new guy coming in and all that. So, my question is, are we going to see pushback from the Nets? Are the Nets going to have some moment with Kyrie, which is basically, listen, dude, we know 35 points a game is cool, but maybe that would not be the best thing for us to actually win games. And then as far as how Kyrie would feel about that, I don't know. I mean, you would hope that there would be a meeting in the middle of some kind. I think Kyrie, with the Celtics, clearly he wanted more shot attempts and everything, but I also feel like he did do a pretty good job of not just hijacking everything. So I think he has that in him, but at the same time, this might also be him kind of being like, finally I can really be me, which is, you know, basically doing his own version of the James Harden thing last season. So it's going to be really interesting to see how all that plays out. As far as the Nets in general, like why are they 1-3 right now? Again, they've had close games. I think some more ball movement would certainly be great for them. But the weird thing is, when you look at the advanced stats, they're kind of in line with last season in a lot of ways in terms of like they're 21st in defensive rating, but they're only like 0.5 points different than last season, and last year they were mid-tier defensively. So I don't know, take that for what it's worth. I think the thing to take away from that is mainly it's too damn early to dive into the advanced stats like that. And we figure if they can just really come to a consistency with the Jared Allen versus DeAndre Jordan starting center thing. I mean, they've each started 2 games so far, so you could argue that's already getting a little weird. Then I think that's going to do a lot for their defense, because if I remember correctly, Brooklyn down the stretch of last season was actually one of the best defensive teams in the league. And I think a lot of that, that's due to the center, of course. So I think that that'll play a part. They've also turned the ball over like a little bit more, which could lead to their defense being a little rough, whatever. I don't want to dive into that too much. Now we can talk about the Kyrie mood swings, because there are many different directions you can go in here, and I feel like if you say 1 or 2 words wrong, it can come across as insensitive. So you gotta respect the way people are. I mean, not everybody is going to be this transparent, bubbly, animated, expressive person, right? Now, at the same time, there's still a level of professionalism that is expected of you if you're going to be in the NBA or in any line of work. And I think the Nets are maybe one of the better teams to deal with this, because when you just look at the, camaraderie that they have gained with their players over the last few years, which you can hear when it comes to like every interview they talk about with Kenny Atkinson and Sean Marks and all that, and you can see it on the floor with how much they like each other. This is probably one of those teams that can actually build that sort of connection with someone like Kyrie. It just might take a little longer because of everything we said earlier, how he's entering this situation, whereas everybody else has already been here. And I think that's step 1, because if you build that relationship up, then number 1, it's going to make it easier for Kyrie to open up. But I think it's also it's going to make it easier for you to just know how the hell to deal with that, because I feel like with Kyrie, he's one of those dudes where sometimes you're going to have to push back on him, and sometimes you're going to have to give him his space. And does that make him difficult? Yeah, it makes him difficult, no doubt about it. But it's the way the guy is, and you gave him a whole lot of money, so you had to know this going into it. But at the same time, what I don't want is, I don't want too many reports leaked out that Kyrie is like a jerk or only cares about himself or that kind of thing, because that's probably a little unfair, even if he does deserve criticism for his time with the Celtics. At the same time, I mean, when he opened up about it, it was pretty understandable with the death of his grandfather, and he didn't know how to deal with it, and I'm sure there's some things in Boston he'd love to take back, no doubt about it. But I guess where I end up is, just because someone may be a little more, I don't even know what the word would be, prickly, I guess, that doesn't mean they don't deserve to be understood. That doesn't mean they don't deserve to have their space or whatever. So I think, part of it is Kyrie's responsibility to look to build relationships with the Nets, and it's also responsibility of the Nets to maybe have to do a little more or something a little different than they've had to do in the past to get Kyrie to really be on board, I guess, So that's just going to be an ongoing thing, and as I say with many things, it'll be interesting to see what happens.